try to illustrate it to people. It's like when you look into a prison, the whole concept of prison, and you try to make rational sense out of it, the problem is you're looking at insanity. And there's no way you can make logical, rational sense out of insanity. Prisons don't work. And it's one thing you're saying. I mean, we did amazing things at this time. And people would say, wow, that would work. The concepts are good. The problem is, no, they won't work because people won't allow them to work because their job security is on the line.
But
they're not going to put themselves out of business.
What is the dollar component of the prison industry? What is the value of that system to states and to the federal government? Do you know that amount?
Massachusetts Department of Corrections gets over $500 million a year every year.
And that's just for the guards and employees.
This is how much money they get. Less than 2% of that budget goes to rehabilitation and programs. 73 to 79% of it goes to salaries. Right. And this is what the problem is. Guards want more and more and more money, higher and higher pay rates, and they have this concept that they say, we have the most dangerous job in law enforcement. I mean, that's so ridiculous. I mean, a cop chasing somebody who just shot somebody down the street, tackling this guy with a gun. That's the most dangerous job in society. Not a guard that sits on his ass 24 hours a day and drinks coffee or watches somebody walk around a cell block. I mean, in Massachusetts, we've had maybe in the last 20, well, more than 20 years, say the last 50 years, maybe 3 guards killed. In the same time frame, how many cops get killed?
But then there's also collateral benefits to having the system that they have. And I'm not promoting, I'm just saying lawyers are making out on this because
absolutely.
Lawyer and and everything else like that.
If you've got a client and they can afford to hire you, and I'm not talking about public defenders, I'm talking about private attorneys who have their pool of clients they take care of, and this case gets dragged out because of the overcrowding situation, the lack of justice, the clerical errors, the mistakes that are made. That's a lot of money right there.
Right now, in this time, in this age, in all states, the idea, what has to happen is the cost factors are so exorbitant that we need to do something. He's right about if you can reduce the population, you reduce the cost factor and the expenses that can go someplace else. We're in a time in this country where the economic factors would be favorable to doing the things that we have proven are right, whether some people will resist it or not. If you can reduce the population in prison, you reduce the job force, you reduce the expense, and that's what has to happen. And however, the individuals coming out have to have jobs and everything else. There has to be a switch in the culture of what we're doing.
But what Bob is saying is don't send them in. Don't let it exist to send them in. It's not having them come out to a job. It's saying, why are they going in there in the first place if it doesn't work?
It's 2 prongs. There's 2. That's right. He's right. But your approach has to be several ways. Those that are going from the court that don't need to go in there shouldn't be in there. That we could do something about them.
Public defenders say that 25% of the people in jail in Massachusetts are innocent.
Don't need to be in there, right?
That's the public defenders are saying that.
Right.
In Massachusetts, the state pays more money to the Department of Correction than it does to higher education.
Yes, exactly right.
That's a problem for social disaster.
Right.
It's the same all across the country. You spend more money in these monstrosities, which is simply throwing money down an abyss.
Right.
And it doesn't serve a purpose.
And every state has a deficit when it comes to forensic science and trying to process, say, DNA evidence that might release somebody or prove their innocence, or
There's no money left to do that. Everybody else is getting a salary.
But if I'm running the place right now and I'm sitting in the governor's office and I need to reduce my costs in government and I got to deal with health care and stuff like that.
We got the answer to that.
That's
Father.
Right.
We have the answer. But they won't do it. This is what you got to keep in mind. They're not going to do it.
With the changes,
okay, but let's just go. Let's just go with the reentry.
Reentry. All right? Let's go with reentry.
The concept of reentry begins when a man goes into the prison, and it continues when he goes on the street. All right. What does that mean? It means when a man comes into the prison system, you have to have trained professional people that can classify an individual. The three of us have three different personalities. Every human being is in and of himself unique. You have to bring an individual into the prison system and say, okay, what's this guy's crime? What's his background? What's his capabilities? Some people were born drug addicts. Some people were just, made a mistake in judgment. All right? I mean, the confusion of how many different types of personalities there are. You have to have a classification system that can sit down and say, hey, here's a kid that can't read or write. He's assaultive and violent. We discovered with our educational programs that we educated kids. Right. That violence disappeared.
That's right. Because
they could express themselves with their fists. They couldn't do it verbally. Right. Once we taught them to do it verbally, the violence disappeared. Okay? So the project is when a person comes into jail, you give them a barrage of tests. You give them psychological tests, aptitude tests, and you find out where this person is at. What did he come into jail with? What did he do to get to jail, and how does he address this issue? Is it an addressable issue?
Now, would you require those tests? Because some people
absolutely. As soon as a person comes into jail, there has to be a classification system that classifies this individual to know what type of programs you want to push this guy to. Listen, the state cannot rehabilitate somebody. An individual has to rehabilitate himself. But the state has to provide the tools to assist an individual to rehabilitate himself. We have an individual that can't read or write. He's not going to survive in the marketplace.
Right.
So to simply say, oh, he's got to do X amount of years and he's back out into the street. Well, he's going to be out there a very short period of time, and then he's going to commit crimes and come right back to prison. That's not being smart on crime. That's being stupid on crime. If you know this kid can't read or write, you teach him to read or write. All right.
Or otherwise, he's going to be taught something else to do a different crime, a greater crime, a more severe crime.
Which means he is teachable.
Which means he's teachable.
Here's the thing. We have to change the culture.
Right.
We have to change the guard culture. We have to change the staff culture. We have to change the inmate culture inside the prison system. When I went to reform school, I learned how to steal a car in reform school. I learned how to take the antenna off a car and make a zip gun. When I got to the state prison, I learned how to pick locks, how to crack safes, how to circumvent burglar alarms. When they say the school of hard knocks, they're not kidding. You put certain types of people in the prison and you ignore them in their needs and what desires, then what's going to happen is they're going to educate each other to the criminal world.
Okay, devil's advocate though, you came from a not so bad neighborhood in a not so bad family. You had the foundation to not choose a life of crime. You had the smarts to take a different path. And everybody gets educated on the streets in one way or another, whether their streets are suburbia or Beverly Hills, wherever it is. We all get educated by society in our environment. You made a choice. His argument just said that, if you have an individual who's got this circumstance and he's going to learn all this in prison, there's still that free will and that choice to say, I may have learned it.
For some people, a kid that's born addicted to drugs, his mother's a hooker, the father's a junkie selling drugs. That's the world that kid got brought up in. He's going to jail. There is no choice. Yeah. He is going to jail. The higher degree of probability he's going to jail, he'd have a better shot of getting on the moon than not going to jail. But this is the thing. When I went to reform school, when I went from reform school to the prison, to what was called Concord at the time, 35 to 45% of the people there I knew from reform school.